A little while back, completed my first playthrough of Sifu, and other than enjoying the story, the fighting system, the world design and its unique mechanics, I also ended up replaying the same 5 levels over again for a second time for the sole purpose of fighting the villains once more. Not to kill them, but instead spare them. Now, villains have existed almost since the creation of video games, and that's for good reason. They usually serve as an obstacle for our protagonist to overcome, or maybe the main reason for why we are even there in the first place. They are also for the most part interesting characters that are full of mysteries and do things that makes us want to get rid of them. Villains are great and sometimes essential if you want to make a good and interesting video game. With all of this said, why is it that almost every single video game protagonist wants to kill the main villain? Not just stop them, but downright end them for good. Now, I bet that some of you by now are probably screaming at the top of your lungs saying something like, "But they deserve it," or "They tried to kill us first." So how about we analyze a few villains from different games and see if we can find a somewhat definitive answer to why we just refuse to spare villains in video games. And the first game to talk about is Bendy and the Ink Machine. Now, without going into too many details about the story, we play as a character called Henry, whose goal at the start of the game is to visit an old art studio to find something a person named Joey wanted him to see. This then very quickly turns into us trying to find a way out of there when we turn on the ink machine and fall through the floor in an attempt to escape. Now, the main villain in Bendy could be up to interpretation if you want to look really deep into this game's lore. But a safe bet to go with is that the Ink Demon is the main villain. I mean, he is feared by literally everyone and everything in the game, so I don't think I'm completely wrong when I say this. So why is he the villain, you might ask? Well, he tries to kill us every time he gets the chance, so he is by no means good. But can we then also say the same thing about Henry when he straight up erases the Ink Demon at the end? It's hard to say if what Henry did really was the only way for him to escape, because we don't exactly have much to go off when it comes to defending the Ink Demon. Pretty much all we know about him is that he likes to kill people and hates it when someone destroys the cutouts of himself. So unless you are fine with being killed by this thing, then I think that we can all agree that deleting the Ink Demon for good was the only way for Henry to escape, and also the best thing that could happen for everyone else in the game. So even if we had the choice, sparing this guy is almost out of the question, since he will only continue to kill and torment the entire studio for who knows how long. But is the same also true for a non-physical villain? In the game Control, you take the role of Jesse Faden and enter the Federal Bureau of Control in order to find out what happened to your brother. But it's not long before we meet the main villain of Control, being the Hiss. Now, to make a long story short, it's not possible in any way to spare this villain, since it's first of all an otherworldly being with no physical body or weak point to spare, and it's also an entity of unknown mass. It's basically an intelligent virus that has infected anyone that doesn't wear one of these things or isn't the main protagonist. And just like in the real world, you can't kill a virus. The only way to take down the Hiss is to close the gateway it's coming from and then remove every trace of it in the real world. But one other villain we can talk about and make a defense for is the other director before us, Trench. Now, contrary to the Ink Demon in Bendy, director Trench actually has a reason for being a villain in Control. Feeling threatened by a paranatural entity called Hedron, Trench opened a gateway from the Hiss into the Bureau, infecting the entire place with the Hiss due to him being afraid of getting replaced by Hedron. After completing the task of letting the Hiss into the Bureau, he hurts himself, where his body is later found by Jessie as she becomes the new director. So with this in mind, Does Trench deserve to be spared if we had the choice to do so? Well, I can see where he's coming from. Trench was one of the few people who believed that Hedron was a danger to the Bureau rather than being its savior like the majority thought. So when no one wanted to listen to his warnings about wearing the HRAs, he turned to what he believed was the only ally he had left, the His. Believing that the His was the only way to save his position and the Bureau, he turned on the slide protector and essentially doomed everyone inside the Bureau. So I think it's very difficult to find a good reason for sparing Trench, since any normal person wouldn't understand his reasons for letting a very dangerous paranatural entity into the real world. Even if we decide to look past the crimes he has committed and do spare him, who's to say that he won't just do it all over again if he ever feels threatened by the Bureau? His crimes are just too bad, and with no clear sign of him being able to change his ways, it's pointless to spare a person like him if he's not capable of changing. Moving on to a different game and a new villain, we now have to talk about Hollow Knight Silksong. And this is where things start to get a bit interesting. Now, the main villain, without looking too deep into this game's lore, is Grandmother Silk, a high being who's also the monarch of Farloom. After being lulled to sleep and betrayed by the weavers of Farloom, the grandmother is desperate to wake up in order to once again rule over Farloom, resulting in her haunting the very silks she has spread throughout the land, driving the bugs of Farloom into a state of madness. And it's now up to Hornet to stop this higher being. Now, it's actually never confirmed, at least to my knowledge, if the grandmother wants to kill Hornet. Yes, it's true that Hornet is a descendant of the Weavers, but if we look a bit into the lore, it seems like Grandmother Silk is more interested in using Hornet to escape her cocoon rather than killing her. But all of that is of course up to interpretation. Now, I can see why being kicked down from your throne only to be replaced by a lot of spider-like creatures must suck, especially for a being of higher status like Grandmother Silk. But is it really okay to start haunting the citizens of the land because she got outsmarted? I would say no. And I think Hornet would say the same thing. This is probably also why Grandmother Silk doesn't survive in any of the endings in Silksong, because her being alive will not save the creatures of Farloom, but instead turn into this shared mind where everyone serves the grandmother for all eternity. So sparing her is almost out of the question. But something interesting happens when we enter the Abyss in Act 3 in order to save Farloom from the Void. At the bottom of this dark pit, we not only fight against a void-infected lace, but also observe something kind of mind-blowing at the end of the fight. You see, instead of killing Hornet and taking revenge on the Weavers for locking her up by letting the Void into the silk cocoon that they are all in, Grandmother Silk instead uses the last of her powers to save both Hornet and Lace from the Void. A problem with the two villains I talked about earlier when it comes to sparing them is that both the Ink Demon and Director Trench are self-centered people. It's true that Trench wanted to save the Bureau from Hedron, since the main purpose of the Director is to keep the Bureau safe from any dangers. But he also wanted to save himself and his position as Director. And the Ink Demon just wants to pick a fight with anyone who happens to stumble upon him. Now, this is also true for Grandmother Silk if you never enter Act 3 of Silksong. As a higher being, she wants to control and make everyone in Farloom worship her like a self-centered queen. But all of this changes down in the Abyss. And I personally think it has something to do with Lace being the daughter of Grandmother Silk. I mean, the entire reason for why she made this silk cocoon was to protect Lace from the Void, so she must to an extent care about her. Even if it's biased to save your own daughter, she still made a selfless sacrifice that someone like me didn't think she was capable of. And it might also be the best outcome for Grandmother Silk to save these two, since she is dead no matter what happens, so you might as well save someone, I guess. But I still think it's naive to say that she deserves to be spared because of one selfless decision made in a dire situation. She would probably, like the other characters, return back to her old ways of ruling over Farloom if she got the chance. A little honorable mention I want to talk about before I move on to the last game in this video is Hornet saving Lace in Act 3. Despite the troubles Lace has caused for Hornet throughout her journey, she still somehow goes through the trouble of saving her at the end. Hornet could, for all we know, have been able to escape from the silk cocoon if she didn't have Lace weighing her down. On the other hand, saving Lace might also have been the only way for Hornet to use Grandmother Silk's powers to escape, since she maybe otherwise wouldn't have cooperated, resulting in all of them dying. Whatever the explanation to Hornet saving Lace might be, it's still good to see that some villains get a second chance rather than just dying when their time is up. And now with Silksong covered, there's just one more game left I want to talk about in this video. We started this video with Sifu and we are also ending it with Sifu. And the main villain of this incredible fighting adventure actually depends on what kind of choices you make as the unnamed protagonist. To once again make a long story short, you play as this middle-aged man or woman who wants to take revenge on the group of people that was responsible for killing your father/master. You do this by fighting your way through 5 different levels, killing nearly anything that stands in your way. And it should be mentioned that none of the 5 members hold any grudges towards the protagonist. They have all in the 8-year time skip moved on from killing Kung Fu masters and are now doing their own things. So it wouldn't come as a surprise if the bosses think that we are now the villain of the story because we couldn't let go of the past. Now that's not to say that the 5 members did not expect us to want revenge. They all knew what was coming and that it was merely a matter of time before we made our move. And this message that we are the main villain of Sifu is further drilled into our heads when we slay the last boss of the game, Yang. After taking the life of the one who killed our father, we are rewarded with the following cutscene, which introduces us to the concept of Wude. Now, Wude is an important part of Chinese martial arts in the sense that it focuses deeply on morality, which for those who don't know means doing the right thing. And using Kung Fu to kill people is not viewed as the right thing to do when talking about Wude, since you throw morality out of the window when you deliver the final punch on Yang. A choice that makes you just as bad, if not worse, than what he was at the beginning of the game. But what if we instead take 5 steps back to the start of the game and this time around do things differently? Well, we still end up killing a majority of the enemies in the game, but by waiting for the stagger to go away on the first boss, we can stagger him a second time, allowing us to spare him. Now, an argument you could make at this point of the video is, do they even deserve to be spared after everything they have done? Well, in contrast to the other villains I have talked about, it's a choice that is up to you. If you think that they all deserve to be spared, then spare them. If you think that they all deserve to die, then go crazy. It's just that we have been given the unusual choice to spare these villains, not for the sake of completing the game, but to experience a what-if scenario. So what if they don't deserve to be spared? If it means that I get the ability to change the personality of the character I play as, then I will 100% look past everything they have done in order to witness that. And from the looks of all of the villains, they seem surprised over the fact that we end up sparing them instead of ending their lives. Because even though some of them have left their old lives of violence behind, they still all lost one very important thing that night: their morality. And it's this morality that will end up giving us the good ending of Sifu if we decide to hold on to it and spare all of the bosses. but not the enemies. They can apparently die by our hands without violating Wude, which doesn't make much sense. So the answer to the question I introduced at the beginning of this video is that most villains are incapable of changing their ways. It's shown time and time again that a lot of villains will continue to do morally bad things to their world if we don't end them for good. But the final answer to this type of question could very well change depending on the choices we are given as the protagonist. Since it's impossible to say if all of these villains would stay the same if they ended up being spared. The only thing I can do and have done throughout this video is make assumptions based on the things we know about these characters. Because the only way for us to spare a villain is if the developers either gives us an alternative choice like in Sifu, or makes it a mandatory thing to do like in Silksong. But anything beyond that is pure guesswork. And that's fine. There is a reason why people even bother looking into a specific character's lore in the first place. It may be to make a video similar to the one you are watching, or because they are interested in that character's story. This is why someone like me makes this type of video for you guys. Because it allows me to express my opinion on a topic and see what all of you think about it. So if I have forgotten something important in this video that is worth talking about, then by all means let me know down in the comments, it really helps me. But other than that, I want to thank you so much for watching this video all the way to the end and hope that you would consider giving it a like or my channel a sub. And until we meet again, bye bye.